So today is going to be a fun one, but if you are hearing my voice and it sounds like I got punched in the face, I didn't. I'm just sick. And if I know anything about being sick, there are three things that are important to do while being sick. One is drink all of the fluids on earth. Two, watch just terrible movies, whatever the worst TV show you can find, and sleep. And then three is to practice some watercolor. That's where all the learning I think happens. And so today we are working on this one right here. It looks simple, but enjoy it because the next one we're doing is this. It's going to get real complex real fast. So enjoy this simplicity while it lasts. And I've been getting a lot of questions about like brush loading and paint and things like that, which I so appreciate. Everybody sends in questions, everybody who comments, like that is awesome because I that helps me understand what to do and what other people are asking for. So thank you to everybody who did that. And so I'm going to kind of walk through like one of the most basic techniques about how do you actually put the paint on this stuff. But first, I want to show a really fun example from a friend named Kim who made this beautiful painting of Denali. And on the back, I saw this, which I thought was just the coolest thing. Hope that's okay. I'm showing this, but maybe it's like proprietary secret stuff. But this was really cool, I thought, to kind of see the scope of colors before painting. And so if you've never tried this out, it's called swatching. This in particular is a color wheel. But if you ever want to try to swatch, what you do is, you can grab the back, or if you don't want to wait for it to dry, I'm just going to use a separate sheet of paper. But sometimes I will grab a little bit of paper, sometimes just scrap paper, and I'll just test out what colors I'm messing with. And so if this is new, awesome. If it's not new, bear with me. It'll take a couple seconds. And it's always good to review the basics. But so we have my little palette here, and you can see I'm slowly chewing through it. It's interesting too. Some people have different wear patterns on paint. Check it out. It's one of the coolest things. This because when you start to get to the end of a palette, it means that you've done a ton of good paintings. This is like one of the coolest things to see. But you can tell I'm like a middle user. But some people always scrape toward the edges, and some people, they'll have all their paint here because they only go from this side. But I'm working through it. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a drop of water to just activate. But I want to show you what happens when you don't. Here we go. Water right here. One super, super, super light. So I'm going to just put a little drop here and then I'll show you why. But watercolor, like that gradient, it's not just color, it's intensity, it's how you use it. I get a lot of comments because people say, "Oh, you make very bright, colorful stuff. How do you do that?" And a lot of it really is just how much I load up on the brush. And this is what you see in the really experienced older painters in particular, is they or younger painters are just confident. They are willing to get a really big, thick brush load and just slap it on. Whereas for me and everybody else who kind of starts usually, you do these light layers and light layers and light layers, and you slowly work through until it's really bright and big and dark. But it takes a while. But if you can't have that confidence, it's like boom. Same with everything, right? The skiers, the dancers, or everybody. It's like the ones who are experienced, they've got that confidence, but it actually was built up over layers and layers and layers and years. So all of this should be activated right now. You can also squeeze paint right off the tube. That's basically pure activated paint. But now, watch this. Little bit of water, same pressure, same everything, and boom. That is the difference of what, 20 seconds with water? So it really does make an interesting difference. Okay, so to swatch something out, usually what I do is I'll just grab a little bit of everything. I'll just use maybe just purple here as an example, or indigo. But I'll often just put a couple little different swatches just to see how things move. So maybe I'll do one like that. These are basically the same. And then I'll add a bit of water down below and just let it flow, leaving one end dark and one end not dark. And when that dries, it'll give me a really good sense of what's going on. If you used to do film photography, it's like basically shooting a test roll of film just to see how stuff works. You can also just watch where you mix other colors too, just to kind of see. But look at that already. You're seeing those blooms. You're seeing how it works. Sometimes I'll kind of do a Punnett square side of things where I'll do one of these and then let them kind of mix just to see. But this is a really, really, really great thing to do before. One, because it means that you're starting these are your first brush strokes. You can kind of be a bit more confident. But also, it just kind of gives you a quick reminder of how the conditions are that day. It's like it's like testing a pair of skis on the snow. Sorry, I we don't have a lot of snow in Alaska right now, so everything is like skis on the brain. But it's like testing the wax on a pair of skis, or if you're a golf person, like testing the wind or the conditions or just how things are. This is something you really don't see a lot of artists do because you're not going to post a picture of this, but this leads to things like this. Well, Kim's in particular is great. Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of that, let's walk through this painting right here, and I'm just going to share exactly what is going through my brain with colors and everything in between. And like I said, this one's going to be simple, but enjoy it because that is not going to last. Seriously, this one is going to be so, so, so fun. All right, procrastination is over. So with this one right here, and I am going to add some little birds here in a second afterwards. I'll make this initial painting, and then I'm going to add some birds or some maybe a paraglide or something. So think what you might want to be putting in here because this tree is enormous. I mean, think about it. These are bears, and they're in the foreground. So something big is flying up here. So with this one right here, I am going to. I've got everything all activated. We're in good shape there. I'm going to come in pretty hot with some nice bright colors, and I'm going to fade them into like this nice kind of. This is the edge of our painting, by the way. I'm going to fade them into kind of something nice and light, so that tree stands out. Which means I'm going to start with all of these ones. So getting a little bit of water. Water is also key. You can see mine is sort of clean. I can't even see it in there, but it's pretty clean. That's something to notice too. Sometimes your water is tinted yellow because of what you're using, so keep an eye on that. So I'm going to start with a little bit of water on the page, and a lot of times this is just because I'm too afraid to actually put a color. And here we go. I'm going to put just a wash of yellow on all of these trees right now. And so you can see I've got just kind of testing it out here. This sort of breaks things up for me a little bit. I'll get often just kind of a dab on my brush and really kind of move it around just a little bit. If you just get right on the edge, it could be a little bit uneven. But I'm kind of trying. This is a pretty soupy texture. And I've just kind of loaded that brush. You can see inside that brush, there's just all of this ink just waiting to go. If you can, kind of use it in one fell swoop. That's great. Another thing too, when I'm painting, I'm using a lot of these as well as your little travel brush. Maybe you've used one, maybe you haven't. They're full of water, and when you squeeze them, water comes out. This one's empty, but it works exactly the same. The difference is though, to clean these, you kind of have to be even more aware, just as another fun element. But it's the same stuff. So if you see it, me using those or these, same techniques. Here we go. All right, fully loaded brush. That is got all the stuff on there. And the reason that I want it fully loaded is I'm not going to keep on diluting and going back and back. It's kind of being able to like hold one note as an opera singer, that is a lung full of air in the art equivalent. So I'm just putting all of this yellow right down here. And I'm not going to worry too much about filling in each of those branches because I'm going to come back into some green and do that. There we go. Big swatchy yellow. Perfect. Now use that all fully up. That's about how much yellow fits on that brush. And now I'm going to go back and do the same with green. This time, though, making it a bit more watery because I want these two to mix. And if this seems like wildly complex, by the way, also moving fast here because while it's watery, I need it to happen. If this seems like wildly complex, it's because I don't think about this stuff while I'm painting. Like my hands know what I'm doing. My brain kind of checks out. I'm listening to bad music. I'm thinking about like something I said, or missaid or misspelled, and I am not thinking at all. So the hands are what know all this information. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not speaking to you, I'm talking to your hands today. Okay, a little bit right there, and then in. So I just added a bunch of yellow and then a bunch of kind of watery green on top, and letting those two mix all their way down. A little bit right there, not being too worried about the lines. It's important to think about the brush with water as well. So for instance, I'm going to put some water down here. Whoops, just drop it on. But if you want like really, really watery, this is as much water can fit on a brush. That's going to give us some good water, like which is what I want right now. I want it to flow around. But a lot of times I will just use a tissue or paper towel, and you can see I can kind of get this brush just to a fine edge. And that happens because, let's say focus there. That happens because there's not too much water. Here's what a bunch of water looks like. And you know what? This might look exactly the same. All right, scratch that. That looks identical. But the difference is really felt. You got a bunch of water, it is going to be kind of, well, it's all over the place. But these fine edges are what happens when you have almost no water. It's really just, what's left with paint. Adding a bunch of water here right now, though. And I want this to kind of work its way to a nice fine bloom of an edge. Something like that. Lastly, I'll just put just a little bit of a wash of blue on top. A lot of water in there. And this might seem kind of elementary, but it's, this is the kind of stuff. This is how watercolor like happens. It's like learning about electricity or something. You use it every day, but the science behind it is really crazy and gives you some insights into how to do it better. So this is basically just blue tinted water. So I'm just dropping this on, letting it do its thing. That's not much too more to that. Okay. There we have it. Beautiful. Also, if you have any questions, drop those in. It's a work in progress, all of this stuff. Also, I'm fully aware that I am either trying to reinvent the wheel or am explaining stuff that everybody else already knows. But it's kind of part of the learning journey. Like my grandmother, that's how she kind of taught me is, she wouldn't say, this is how you paint, this is what you do. She just kind of led by example and let me make mistakes. And ultimately, that's what it does come down to. You can know all the science in the world. It's just about making some mistakes. You'll discover some stuff, or more likely, you'll rediscover some stuff, but that's okay. All right. I want to show you this really quick too. Check out this swatch. Look at that. Oh, that's the kind of stuff I want to recreate. Anyway, you learn a lot because it did not look like that when we initially put it down. And it kind of just gives you a little bit of a head start to know what to expect because this right here could do lots of stuff like that. You just won't know. All right. So we got all of this. Up here, I'm going to do a big chunk of blue, and then I'm going to let that fade down to almost nothing. So that way this right here kind of stands out and really, really shows through. So what I'm going to do is probably load up a brush. I'm going to check and just see how stuff looks on the wetness scale. It's pretty darn wet. So actually, I might be well, I'm going to put a tiny bit of salt just because it's on the desk and because I want it to match. And now I'm going to toss this to let it dry off just a tad while I'm going. Whoa. Whew. Sorry, moving slowly, but this is the nature of being sick. And while I'm doing that, I want to show just some really interesting things too with these swatches. So put another little card right there. The beauty about trail tiles and just like any watercolor paper, by the way, is it's so thick, you get two sides. So why wouldn't you use one? A lot of these paintings are, they look great, but like you're wasting the whole side. If you don't put swatches on the back of something, why bother? All right, so we've got a little bit right there. I will use this one in the future as well. But with these things, a lot of times you can get a really good sense of how things work while swatching. Oh, shoot. In a different way. And I'm looking for some paint, which I lost. It's one of those days. Out of here somewhere. Oh, glad nobody can see my desk. It is a mess. All right, here we go. So, just got a few paints. What do we got? Some Daniel Smith and looks like some Winsor Newton. Paint is paint. If you use paint like this out of a tube, it's real concentrated, goes into something like this. And why I was so excited about kind of getting to the metal is because that takes a lot of sketches. I mean, that is hundreds of brushstrokes, right? Just to get to that point. But if you are wild and crazy, you can paint with straight paint. This is as concentrated as it's going to be. This is like the most expensive version of acrylic if you wanted. But you can paint directly on the page with paint. A lot of times people squeeze it onto a palette. I'm just going to show you right here. But this is, there we go, a little bit concentration there. And then I'm mixing some blue as well because I want to show you what happens when they combine. It's pretty cool. Right there. There we go. So we're dealing with some Antwerp blue and some brown. Looks like some burnt sienna. But you can put this either directly on the paper or directly on the palette and work with it there, and it gives you these bright, luscious, kind of dark, dark, dark tones. The issue is it's really hard to pull up. That's fine. I'm going to show you what happens here. So first, I'm going to swatch these out a little bit right here. And you can see it just, you got to kind of pull at it. It's almost like washing peanut butter or something off of a pan. So you kind of mix that all down. You got this bright, bright tone, but you can still kind of pull it down a little bit, some of that water. Same with this one. If you're ever doing like a crazy night scene or something like that, you might end up doing some direct painting on the page. So you have these two right here. I'll show you what happens when they mix. We'll just put a line together. There we go. We'll let those do some mixing. But then when you do mix things like this as well, so they'll kind of mix next to each other, but this mixed with this is going to give you something really interesting. A brown and a blue creates an indigo or something like it. It's called a dark. Payne's gray is one of these. But look at this. You get this lovely kind of complex dark tone. A little bit too much in that one. There we go. Is lovely complex dark tone. And you can kind of see that. But the reason I want to show you this is say you do something like this and it's just way too dark. There's a couple ways you can pull that off. One, use a paper towel. This can also be a really great way to make clouds or something. So say you have a texture, you want to get a really cool texture. Ruining some paper here. You want a really cool texture. You can always just blot just with the edge. You can kind of roll this into like a real fine almost pen. But if you want a cool texture, you can kind of bunch it up just like this. Almost like you're like creating like one of those kind of swirly patterns. Each of those edges is going to lift a ton of stuff off. And you can basically create like this rose shape almost. And it, let's see, it is totally out of focus. There we go. And so it can create this really lovely, almost organic pattern. So if you're doing like clouds or something, you quickly just roll it to the edges. You make these great little textures, great little shapes. That is a really great way to do it. Kind of get some neat stuff like that. The other thing you can do is you can lift. And that is much more easily seen when something's already done. That's why I did these. So these right here are very, 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 that is like coated on, but you can use water to pull something back up. So no paper is going to lift that up. It is dry, dry, dry. But if you just kind of scrub at it just a little bit like this, just kind of working, almost overworking it on purpose. And then I use my paper towel. There we go. I feel like a Scrub Daddy infomercial, but this is a really great way as well. You can do it on purpose, you can do it accidentally, but that can kind of pull some of these things off if you're worried about having put too much paint or paper on. Voila. Okay. Probably just preaching to the choir here. You probably know what's going on, but it's good to remember in times. And also just to think about the creativity side of things. A lot of these things we use for fixing mistakes could actually be one of the coolest techniques you could ever imagine. That's why mistakes are so important. Okay, so this is dry now. And now we're going to add a big swatch of blue. Here's where this is going to come in. A little bit of water. You can see my water's getting dirty. I'm not going to care about, going over this one right here. Totally fine. A little bit of water down here. And now I want this to be dark. If you are a person who doesn't normally go dark, do it now. Here we go. Kind of layering into some of that. Like you saw, you can always pull it up later if you need. Here we go. Big swatch of blue. Let's add that in there. There we go. I do sometimes feel like the mark of a good watercolor is just how few brushstrokes you can take. I am probably in the middle tier. It'd be fascinating if there could be something like a pedometer for a paintbrush. You could just see how they all kind of factor in there. But I'm adding just a little bit here. And now I'm going to start just adding in just water. It's already kind of connected to that one. I might pull a little bit in here, but I really just kind of want to lay it down. Just adding water. It's going over that tree, but that's fine. It's because I want this to kind of be nice and Easy. Maybe a bit of purple as well. Adding a little bit right to the middle. Maybe I'll touch the edge. But it's a weird thing, but think of almost like how few brushstrokes can I make? And when you do that, all of a sudden you realize that the brushstrokes you do need to make need to be a whole lot darker. A little bit there, a little bit here, and there we go. That probably should be enough. I'm tempted just to kind of keep on going over, keep on working it, but that's probably enough right there. Maybe a little drop of water or two just to make some interesting blooms, perhaps. But for the most part, that's really all it takes. I'll dry that off really quick. Keep on thinking about that bird. And now it's on to the next. The other thing when it comes to kind of keeping stuff off is you can use mask. Maybe you've used mask, maybe you haven't. It's super interesting stuff that apparently I don't have on my desk right now, but it's basically rubber cement. You put it down, you can put stuff over it, and then you can peel the mask off, which is the most satisfying thing on earth. It's like, yeah, it's like peeling a sunburn or something. Yeah, it is. It's a weird visceral thing, but oh my gosh, it's just clean underneath. Woo! So you can put mask on. Once it dries, you can paint over it, and then you can just peel it off after you paint a layer or two over it. It's a really, really cool thing, but it takes some forethought, which I usually don't have. Usually for me, I'm mostly on the I made a mistake and I need to fix this now kind of a situation. Okay. And then lastly, as far as kind of fixing mistakes, you can always add other things over top. And if you just darken everything down, it makes the lighters light. I feel like that's something that I kind of need to put out there. But like for a lot of what I do, I make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes I'll make an entire first painting. We just saw, a bunch of these with the other ones. This right here, way too light. And so what I would probably do is I'd probably just paint an entire another layer of green over there, which meant I need to make this a bit darker, but that's okay. That's the other level. A lot of times you barely see your underpainting because it was just sort of the start, and it's okay to make anything an underpainting in that way. All right, one more second to let that other one dry. And while I do it, I got to show you this just because it's the coolest thing ever. Look at this swatch. I mean, doesn't that like level of darkness, like, oh, the contrast. I cannot get enough of it. But I also can never start this dark. It's just too, maybe in like another 10 years, I'll have the confidence. But like this is the kind of stuff is so, so, so cool to me. But it just takes mistakes. And sometimes that means like squirting it directly onto the page or something like that. But trust in the process, trust in the mistakes, and you'll find where you need to be. Just every time you do something you like, take note and just slowly move in that direction. It'll happen naturally. Watercolor's great like that. All right, time to go grab this. Let's see how it's looking. There we go. Look at those blooms. Lovely. And look how dark that is. That turned out just fine. It always dries lighter. That's a really fun one. Okay. Sorry. Getting breath here. Not firing on all cylinders. Okay, so finally, with this right here, oh, it's still a little darker. That's totally fine. While I wait for that to dry, I'm just going to add a couple flicks of some texture in here. Just scrape that salt off. Looks like it did basically nothing, but that's okay. It wasn't super dark. So I'm just going to add a little bit of some texture. Get these out of the way and just flick on maybe some purple, maybe some blue. I often use whatever is the exact same color that I do with everything else. Partially because it means that everything's coordinated. It's all part of the same palette. Also because I'm lazy. And I'm just going to flick a little bit on there. Something like that. Just give a bit of texture. Now that is too dark in a lot of places. A little bit too dark for me right there. So I'm just going to come in with that paper towel and just lightly press. I don't want to totally get rid of everything, but I don't want most of it. And that is going to give me just some nice little lightness on the texture. Just having some fun. Just wanted to make it a little bit more dark, but also add some interesting elements to it. I'm gonna try again now, but this time I'm gonna add a lot more water, and that means everything is gonna dry lighter. Something like that. There we go. These look really dark, but I can already tell they are actually quite light because of how much water's in there. There we go. Mostly aiming for this edge, this corner right now where I tried to put the salt on. and I'll just leave those, let them dry, and that should get us where we're going. All right, time for this tree. Ready or not, here we come. Dry or not, here we come, really. Oh, yeah, looks like it's still pretty dry. While I'm at it, maybe I'll even add just a touch of that texture thing that I talked about. Here we go. A little bit of this. Folding it. I want as much edge as I can, but I also want them to all kind of line up. There we go. We got this nice little edge. Oop, and now I'm just going to just put a couple little bits right here, mostly in the areas that don't have any interesting textures on them. Just kind of make some interesting cloud shapes. Feels organic, feels natural, compared to if you just use a hard edge, you're going to get a rectangle of some kind. There we go. That's lovely. And things are a bit more dry now. All right, for this tree, making it dark because I need it both to be darker than this and also contrast this out right here. So here we go. A little bit of green start right on the back. Real dark, but it's all about that contrast. So I'm also leaving these areas kind of lighter as well. Just kind of starting it in there. And then I'm going to add some dark blue, maybe some indigo and some purple, just kind of for fun. So there we go, a little bit there. And now here's a bit of blue perhaps. This is the beauty of a small palette. I'm using the exact same color blue. It looks like I'm like matching on purpose, but the trick is I just don't have much paint. It's kind of like having not very many clothes, and then everybody's like, "Wow, you're always so matching. Like your hat's matching your shoes." And it's like, "Well, I only have one pair of shoes and one blue hat, so voila." Okay, a little bit there, a little bit down here. The reason I'm not going to use blue up there though is because it would match too much. I do want those to be a bit more contrasting. And then finally, maybe a touch of indigo or purple or something right there. I'm not going to use this really thick loaded brush on top because I don't want it to be too thick. So here's where it comes in. Basically drying off the brush. It has no excess water. And now I'm grabbing a little bit of that nice indigo. And it is just very, very fine point. I wish you could feel this, but it's like the difference between a brush with water plus paint versus a brush with nothing. Very dry brush plus paint. It still flows, but it's just way more detailed. But you don't get to go quite as long. A little bit more down here. It's flowing a bit, but that's totally fine. There we go. Kind of one of those wild, crazy, kind of redwood style trees that just sticks up above everything else. Just having some fun with it. And then finally, if you want to add something else, that's what I'm thinking of doing right now. Not sure if everything is dry enough, but we're going to give it a C. Probably something right in here. Just double checking. Looks great. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of a bird just to kind of have something fun. Now, don't forget the size of things. So this is, well, I think technically this is right here, but just for scale, these are bears. And there's like a whole layer of, trees in between those. So this is huge. So I'm not going to make a bird that size unless I want a bear-sized bird. Maybe I do. But if I make little tiny birds, even something like this big, so let's have a couple kind of coming off of the tree, something like this. That is enough to make the tree feel enormous because those birds are going to be like the size of eagles at this point. You basically just need to make a V and then an N and a V and an N and a V and an N. A couple more and maybe a couple straight lines where they're kind of just... There you go. Check this out. That simple. How close can I go? Yeah, there you go. So just a few like that. You can also put a paraglide or whatever else you want in there, but really, really easy. These will dry a lot lighter. You're just not going to see it for a second. And there you go. There's the deeply, deeply complex stuff kind of going on in my hands while my brain just takes a little bit of a break. But if you have any other questions, thank you so much for bringing those forward. And what's your process? I'm super curious how so many other people think. Are we on the same wavelength? Or maybe you have a much more simple way of doing things and I'm just overthinking everything. But if you do get a chance swatching things out, it gives you a sense of tone. And you see stuff like this. I mean, for me, I don't even know what I would use this for, but I want to. I see these colors and I want to. It's almost like hearing a phrase or an instrument or something and just wanting to hear it in a song. And sometimes stuff like this just gives you inspiration to go figure out the painting that it belongs to. But if you get a chance, feel free to subscribe, check out the newsletter. We do have some fun stuff coming in there as well. And yeah, rest, take care of yourself. You don't need to be sick to need to take a rest day. It is okay. But I can't wait to jump into tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but this next one, because this right here is going to be really, really wild. We're going to be doing little tiny house made out of a boat with a little person going to it. We are going to go into full detail compared to really focusing on the paint.